Well, hello, Cheryl Strayed, and hello, Valley Church. My name is Darren Seitz, and Cheryl, I just want you to know what a fan I am of your 2012 memoir, Wild, From Lost to Found on the Pacific Crest Trail. And Cheryl, I want you to meet my church, Valley Church. And Valley Church, I want you to meet Cheryl, which you will in the course of this letter. Valley Church, in case you don't know, Wild is the story of how you, Cheryl, trudged an insane length of the Pacific Crest Trail in 1995 when you were only 26 and unmoored by sorrow, as you write in your book, hauling a 70-pound backpack, which you nicknamed Monster. Well, I'll tell you a little bit more, Valley Church, about the Pacific Crest Trail that Cheryl hiked in the summer of 1995. But let me just say to you, Cheryl, congratulations, because this is the 25th anniversary of your famous hike that inspired the book. And I just want to tell you that I love the adventure of it, your encounters with bears and rattlesnakes and even a friendly llama and some little black frogs that marched over you when you took a short nap one afternoon on a fallen log. In fact, I read that was Oprah Winfrey's favorite scene in the book about the little frogs. Anyway, Cheryl, Valley Church is in Cupertino, California, just down the street from Apple Computer, and we are a diverse group, a family from all over the world. In fact, I'm looking out even now on people from all over the globe, which is very exciting. Well, about my relationship with your book, Wild, I heard about it from my brother Dan, and the minute I downloaded it onto my phone and hit the play arrow, I was totally hooked. So much so that I realized an e-edition that was borrowed would not do, and so I had to have my own copy. And so I went out and I bought, it's used, but it's in excellent condition, first edition copy of Wild. And you'll notice too that there is a veritable forest of Post-its sticking out of the book, because so many of the passages just said something to me about life that I thought was valuable. And I'm not the only one who enjoyed it. It was a #1 bestseller on the New York Times list. It's been translated into 30 languages. My friend Lonnie, who might be here today, who read it, and we talked about it, and she said she remembers at Costco mountains of copies when it first came out because of how popular it was. There are 17,000 reviews of this book on Amazon with oodles of stars. In fact, here's kind of an interesting tidbit. When I got my copy of Wild from the seller, tucked into the pages was a note, and it says, it's from, on stationery that is from Monica. It says, Pat, this book is interesting, raw, insightful, and hard to believe. I had to put it down for a while because of certain events. Pass it on when you're done. Love to you, Monica. And I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. And I had fun following Pat through the book and observing what she found to be interesting, raw, and insightful. Many of the things that I did. Well, Cheryl, I just want to say that your book, Wild, was a gift to me as I make my way down the HLT, the human life trail. And that's a trail that every human being is on even now. And the ancient Hebrew scriptures often talk about life in trail terms. Well, what did I get from Wild? First, I just gained wonder about the trail itself. And to my Valley Church friends, in case you don't know, the PCT, as it's called, is a continuous path stretching from the US-Mexico border all the way to the border of Canada. It's 2,653 miles long. And it's a path that goes through 25 national forests, 7 national parks, and over 10 mountain ranges. And through hikers, as they're called, carry everything on their backs, with only occasional opportunities to resupply. So now, Cheryl, thanks to you, I have a raging case of PCT fever. And I've been driving my family a little crazy by watching PCT videos and hoping one of these days to hike at least some of it, but probably not as much as you did when you were 26 in the summer of 1995. So anyway, I just gained wonder from your book and some knowledge too about how to do it, you know, packing and second skin, a cool product for blisters, and the resupply boxes you mail to yourself at tiny little outposts along the way. But more than that, I gained some wisdom about life from you, Cheryl, the trail hiker herself, because your book helped me to understand life from the perspective of a woman who is my age, but who grew up on the opposite side of the country and with deprivations that I never had. So Valley Church, just to get to know Cheryl's perspective a little bit, let me just share some of the themes that she writes about. She writes about parenthood and what a child needs from her mom and dad. And Cheryl, you write about how you only got a tiny percentage of what you really needed to thrive. And you write about fatherhood in particular and how your dad didn't dad you at all. He didn't father you, but he terrorized your mom and your siblings before you all made your escape when you were 6. And you write, Cheryl, about grief because you lost your own mom, Bobby, when she was 45. And again, you, Cheryl, were only 22. And the crater that this left in your life. And you wrote, nothing could ever bring my mother back or make it okay that she was gone. It broke me up, it cut me off, it tumbled me end over end. You write about romantic relationships and your longings and pleasures and regrets from your decisions. You write very openly about the unraveling of your marriage, saying, what I had to have when it came to love was beyond explanation, it seemed. You write, Cheryl, about touch and your need for contact. In fact, you call yourself repeatedly the woman with a hole in her heart. Page 38, it was the hungry, empty feeling. I'd wished I had a companion, someone to press my body against. You write about yourself, puzzling over your own acts of kindness and not so kindness. Writing, what had I done when I squandered my marriage with Paul, the solid, sweet husband who'd loved me so steadfastly? And you write about your desire to be, as you write, responsible, ethical, and good, and yet you admit to smashing things up, is a phrase that you use. And I know we at Valley can completely relate to the idea of smashing things up and self-perplexity that says, why do I do these things that I do? And connected to this is your biggest theme, and it's redemption, and whether we humans need it from someone without, or if we just need healing that we give to ourselves. Redemption versus healing, forgiveness versus refreshment. It's a theme. And you wrote this, I was sick with myself. I'd burned candles and made proclamations in my journal. I'd come to healthy conclusions about acceptance and gratitude, about fate and forgiveness. But these conclusions give way to more questions. 50 years later, after a disappointing intimate encounter, you write, I was feeling a mounting sense of something that wasn't quite sorrow, wasn't quite regret, and wasn't quite longing, but was a mix of them all. So redemption or healing, this question, it drives your book. And you write about faith and prayer. And you say, I was a terrible believer in things, but I was also a terrible non-believer in things. I was as searching as I was skeptical. I didn't know where to put my faith, or if there was such a place, or even precisely what the word faith meant in all of its complexity. Everything seemed to be possibly potent or possibly false. And Cheryl, you write about men and what makes a good one. You write about books, including the ones you read exhaustively in your tent at night, including, I love this, The Complete Stories of Flannery O'Connor, which you call an incredible book. And I agree, she's one of my favorites. And speaking of good men and books together, you had to read O'Connor's story, A Good Man is Hard to Find. More on this in a minute. In other words, Cheryl, you write about all the issues that I and my Valley Church family are interested in exploring together from the ancient writings, the scriptures. And I'm reaching out to you, just so you know, Cheryl, I'm just basically your age, just a tad younger. And we were young then, and now we're middle-aged, and we're more than halfway down the human life trail. And I believe that because we're all on this trail together with our successes and our shames, that we need to help each other, because that's what people do on the PCT. They share supplies and knowledge and encouragement because, well, you're all on it together. And since we are all on the HLT together, I think we should share what we've learned as we navigate this trail between two clouds. The dense cloud we come out of when we're born and we recognize, oh, I'm alive. And the dense cloud we go into when we get close to death, thinking, where am I going? What happens to me? So I started this letter to you, Cheryl, a couple weeks ago when I was staying in the shadow of Mount Shasta, which you walked by exactly 25 years ago this summer. And I thought about you trekking by a quarter century. And I've been wondering if you found answers to your big questions, because I think your book ends somewhat ambiguously. And because your gift, or your book was a gift to me, I want to give you a gift in return. It's from my church, and it's 3 stories from another memoir that might help you as you make your way down the HLT. And all 3 questions ask one basic question. Is Jesus a good man? Is he worth a reach? Because Jesus was constantly being evaluated and appraised as he went along. In fact, he was an epic hiker himself. He hiked approximately 3,100 miles during his public life. And as he went along, people wanted to know if he was, to use your phrase, Cheryl, possibly potent or possibly fake. That's the question they asked about him. And Cheryl, you appraise the men you meet, and I invite you to appraise Jesus, because a good man is good to have, but hard to find. And I think he might answer some of your questions and address some of your longings. So for now, let's just call him the possibly good man. And just see how he treats people, especially the young, and especially girls and women. And the first story is from chapter 9 of Matthew, and I call it the outer ring story. In Valley Church, you can follow along in your notes if you want to see these excerpts from Matthew's memoir. It starts like this. While he, meaning Jesus, was saying these things, behold, a ruler came in and knelt before him, saying, my daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her, and she will live. Well, Jesus is talking when a man identified by his position, he's a ruler, bows down and pleads on behalf of his daughter. And he has high social standing in the community, but he's threatened by the permanent loss of his child. And notice too that unlike your dad, Cheryl, he prioritizes the well-being of his daughter. And Valley, men, that's a really good lesson for us, no matter how important we think we are in the world or whatever our position is, to prioritize the needs of our children. And Cheryl, you weren't loved rightly by a dad. In fact, you were wronged by yours, and you describe it. Rather than protecting you, he terrorized you and your mom and your siblings, smashing dinner plates and threatening to give you knuckle sandwiches, and yet still you were devoted to him and thought divorce to be the very worst thing that could happen. And you wrote, in spite of everything, I loved my dad, and I knew if my mom divorced him, I'd lose him, and I was right. Cheryl, I think the best thing about this dad in the story is that he brought Jesus to his daughter. He didn't just prioritize her, he prioritized a person for her. And switching for a second to your mom, whom you loved and who was exceptional in so many ways. You called her the keeper of your life, and someone who came at you and your siblings with maximum maternal velocity. Well, later you wrestle with her legacy and you're candid about some of her shortcomings. And in her last days in the hospital, you describe your own spiritual desperation as a result of who your parents never gave you. And you wrote this: I prayed fervently, rabidly, to God, any God, to a God I could not identify or find. I cursed my mother, who had not given me any religious education. Resentful of her own repressive Catholic upbringing, she'd avoided church altogether in her adult life, and now she was dying, and I didn't even have God. Cheryl, nobody brought God to you. And I think that left a big crater. But notice the Father's confidence, his belief about Jesus. Again, verse 18, he says, so matter-of-factly, but come and lay your hand on her, and she will live. This Father has this conviction about Jesus' capability and his contactability. And the word which you use is faith. He says, just be close. Just place your hand on her. And notice, not even two hands. Just one hand will do. And she will rise up. And she will resume her young life. Well, how did this conviction form? Where did she get this idea that Jesus could raise her out of death with a simple touch? And the answer is reports about him from the masses, about Jesus. Earlier in Matthew's memoir, Jesus had been delivering people facing a whole host of dangers like leprosy, paralysis, fever, demons, and storms. But no threat to human well-being was beyond Jesus' capacity to neutralize. And his reputation spread like wildfire as a result. Well, what does the possibly good man do? Does he scorn the Father? Does he say, don't interrupt me? Does he turn and walk away? No. Verse 19, and Jesus rose and followed him with his disciples. He makes a beeline for this 12-year-old child. And, okay, that's evidence that he's a good man, but can he do anything when he gets there? You know, healing the living is one thing, but raising the dead is another. Well, before we can resolve this story, another story breaks in. It's a story within the story. And I guess we could call this one the inner ring story. And it starts in verse 20. And behold, a woman who had suffered from a discharge of blood for 12 years came up from behind him and touched the fringe of his garment. For she said to herself, if I only touch his garment, I will be made well. And unlike the ruler who stands at the center of social life, this woman is at the margins. And she's threatened too by a socially and physically debilitating illness. It's a hemorrhage that can't seem to be healed, and it makes relationships and worship almost impossible because of ceremonial uncleanness in this Jewish context. But just like the ruler, she has conviction about Jesus, that he's capable and that he's contactable. And we know she's full of faith because we're privy to her self-talk. Touch him and I'll be okay. And the tense of the verb suggests that her self-talk was on repeat play. Touch him and I'll be okay. Touch him and I'll be okay. Touch him and everything will be okay. Well, where does she get this conviction? Like the ruler, it's formed by reliable reports about Jesus. Again, his capability and his contactability to all kinds of people. And like the ruler, her conviction expresses itself in some wild action. She approaches from behind, hoping to be unnoticed, just making contact with the very tip of his garment. And so the question is, will she get the same response from the possibly good man that the ruler gets? Verse 22, Jesus turned, and seeing her, he said, take heart, daughter, your faith, there it is, has made you well. And instantly the woman was made well. Just notice how he pivots in her direction with the slightest the barest excuse to do so. And her heart probably skips a beat thinking, what will he do? Will he reverse this cure since I touched him without permission? But no, notice his affection. He calls her daughter. And we're meant to see in this story her conviction about Jesus, his competence, again, his touchability, his potency, and his non-fakeness, which brings a complete cure. It said that she's made well at that moment. And speaking of that phrase, made well, in the healings of Jesus, that phrase is never used just to refer to a single body part, but always to the whole person. So it's not just physical relief here, but trans-physical restoration of this woman. It's not just her body that works the way it should, but now it's her emotional burden that's lifted. A hole in her heart has been filled by Jesus through faith. Your faith, he says, has made you well. Again, what's Jesus saying? Your conviction about me, it has consequences. Your confidence in me, that I'm touchable, I'm reachable, combined with your courage to be a little wild and reach out, well, it transformed you. Okay, well, story 2, it leapfrogs story 1, and it's resolved. Her conviction is vindicated. She's whole. Now back to the girl in story 1, the outer ring story. Verse 23, Jesus came to the ruler's house and saw the flute players and the crowd making a commotion. When Jesus arrives, the funeral/burial procedure is already in motion, and it's a bitter scene. And Michaela depicts part of it in her art piece inside the notes, with these mourners playing dirges on their instruments. Another version of the same event reports that all were weeping and mourning. And this is a picture of people literally beating their chests out of their grief regarding the loss of this child. Because Jews don't keep a stiff upper lip. They roar out the pain that they feel. And grief without hope is even louder. And Cheryl, you know about grief without hope. Because you wrote at one point, the universe, I'd learned, was never ever kidding. It would take whatever it wanted and it would never give it back. But is this taking here irreversible? Well, something crazy happens. The possibly good man makes a very strange statement. Verse 24, he said, go away to the mourners and the people making the commotion. For the girl is not dead, but sleeping. And that's strange. Doesn't Jesus know she's dead? Well, yes, he does. And here's what he's saying. The possibly good man means death struck, yes. But because of me, death can be softened to the impact of sleep. Almost like in a fairy tale where the long-awaited prince appears and his contact with the lifeless princess brings her back to life. Well, Matthew's story is no fairy tale. This is memoir, Cheryl. It's like yours. It's a true recitation. 9:23b, and get this, and they laughed at him. They derided Jesus. Well, will conviction about Jesus be vindicated a second time? He healed the body and lifted the heart of a living woman. In story 2, daughter, take heart, your faith has made you well. But can he restart the heart of a dead person? At the end of story 1, verse 25, but when the crowd had been put outside, he went in and catch this. He took her by the hand. Touch. And just stop right there. That phrase, took her by the hand, is very strong. It means he seizes. He takes control. But here is touch without terror and injury, unlike what you, Cheryl, experienced from your dad. And what happens at the touch of Jesus? End of verse 25. And the girl arose. She was called back to life. And can you imagine their reaction? They were beating their breasts and then laughing in Jesus' face. What did they do when she walked out the front door? Healthier than she had ever been. You know, a lot of people laugh at people who claim to love Jesus. And we Christians do laughable things sometimes. We don't deny that. But not too many people, in fact, I've never met anyone who laughs at Jesus. You just can't. He is just such a good man. In fact, he's good in a category all of his own. And maybe for that reason, he's more than just a good man. Someone once said, Jesus appeals to the soul as light appeals to the eye and as love appeals to the heart. And it's interesting, Cheryl, because you talk about the universe taking but not returning. But according to Christian scripture, here's the one who made the universe, giving this daughter back to her dad. Verse 26, and the report of this went through all that district. And this news keeps spreading as more and more people hear the stories. They gain conviction about Jesus' contactability and capability, and they reach out when he walks by. And it happens all the time. People who aren't good at believing, Cheryl, to use your phrase, they often get better at it when they read these historical reports about him. And then they make like the ruler, and they make like the woman, and they reach out, and really remarkable things happen in their lives. Cheryl, I want to leave you with one last story. It has much in common with the first two. In fact, it even shares an identical element with the second story, the inner story. And so I call this third story the overlapping story. And we've seen how Jesus saves people from physical and emotional threats. He makes people well. He saves those with belief in his power and approachability. But Cheryl, your pain or threat, it really has a different dimension to it. You write about doing things that later you regret terribly. And again, we at Valley can relate to this turmoil from remorse for the things that we have done. And again, this question, this inner dis-ease, it drives your book. And you wrote this, and this really struck me. Perhaps being amidst the undesecrated beauty of the wilderness meant that I too could be undesecrated, regardless of what I'd lost or what had been taken from me, regardless of the regrettable things I'd done to others or myself, or the regrettable things that had been done to me. Redemption versus healing, forgiveness versus refreshment. This is the question. And it reaches its sharpest point, I think, towards the end of the book when you write, and these words just exploded off the page, I didn't want to torment myself with all the ways I'd wronged my ex-husband. What if I forgave myself, I thought. What if I forgave myself even though I'd done something I shouldn't have? What if I was a liar and a cheat and there was no excuse for what I'd done other than because it was what I wanted and needed to do? What if I was sorry, but if I could go back in time, I wouldn't do anything differently than I had done? What if I was never redeemed? What if I already was? Again, I think this story speaks to this question and this turmoil that you express. Because here's a woman in this story threatened by guilt from having smashed things up, probably in her personal relationships. She's described simply as a sinner in Luke 37 without any other detail. But like the ruler and like the hemorrhaging woman, she has conviction about Jesus. That he's powerful, that he's approachable. She's heard the reports, and she believes. And one day, she hears that Jesus is dining at the home of a Pharisee, and then her conviction wells up, and it expresses itself in wild action. Verse 37, she brought an alabaster flask of ointment, and standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears, and wiped them with the hair of her head, and kissed his feet and anointed them with ointment. Here's the question again. What will the possibly good man do in this case? Here she is, touching him, visibly, will this conviction about Jesus be vindicated for the third time. And even the dinner host, Simon, who, like everyone, is appraising Jesus every step he takes, every word he speaks, he says to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner. And then Jesus turns, but not to the woman, but to the Pharisee, and he comments on her conviction-driven wildness. He says, when I came into your house, Simon, you gave me no water for my hiking tired feet. But she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. And you didn't greet me with a customary kiss, but for the time I came in, she hasn't stopped kissing my feet. And you didn't pour soothing oil on my head in welcome, but she has anointed my feet with ointment. Then he said to him, her sins, her multiple smash-ups, are forgiven because she's come to me with full penitential velocity, expressed in her actions of love. And then he turns from Simon to the woman who's made a mess of things and says to her, your sins are forgiven. Your faith has saved you. Go in peace. And notice, she's not just redeemed, she's healed too, because he blesses her. Go in peace. He sends her with his shalom. Your faith has saved you. Bells are probably going off in our minds. Where have we heard that before? Those are the exact words he said to the hemorrhaging woman. And I put it in your notes in blue to show you. They're just translated a little differently into English because of the context. But it's the exact same word for word phrase. And Cheryl, I think that this story speaks again directly to your question about redemption versus healing. See, for those with conviction about Jesus who reach out when he walks by, they receive redemption, forgiveness for the wrongs they've done, and healing for the wrongs done to them. They're saved. They're made well. Forgiveness and refreshment from God. Your faith has saved you. And the meaning is twofold, encompassing both redemption and healing. And those are the words splashed across Michaela Jones's beautiful painting that she made for us. It's your faith has saved you. And I'm going to send you, Cheryl, a copy of this to hope as a little gift from Valley Church. And I hope that these stories will suggest to you that Jesus is a good man, and honestly, he's not hard to find. He's not hard to find at all. He's reachable no matter the wretched things we've done, but we have to reach. We have to extend the hand of our inner being to him. And again, he has this authority to forgive because he's not just a good man, he's God in the flesh. And he proved his identity repeatedly, no less so when he raised that girl from the dead in the inner ring story. And finally, speaking of Flannery O'Connor, and you talk about her through your book and how you read her at night, and you had to read A Good Man is Hard to Find. That's the most famous story in the book. Well, you know the authority then, or the clout, of someone who could do that to that girl, what he did in bringing her back to life. And here's the most famous line by a character, this tortured soul who has done wrong. This character in O'Connor's story says, Jesus was the only one that ever raised the dead, and he shouldn't have done it. He's shown everything off balance. If he did what he said, then it's nothing for you to do but throw away everything and follow him. And if he didn't, then it's nothing for you to do but enjoy the few minutes you got left the best you can. If Jesus raised the dead, and reliable reports say that he did, then we all must choose. And how did he heal us and redeem us both? He carried our packs. Cheryl, you talk about 70-pound monster on your back. Well, what Jesus did is cinched our monsters of sin onto his back, and he hiked alone to the cross. Isaiah 53 talks about how he carried our griefs and bore our sorrows. He was pierced for our transgressions and crushed for our iniquities. But again, he didn't stay crushed and entombed. His Father raised him from the dead, and he's alive today. And he's carried all of our packs because all of us have strayed. That should be the surname of every human being. We've all strayed, the Bible says. And so, Cheryl, I just hope that you would reflect on this Jesus. I think he can fill the hole in your heart. I think he can redeem, forgive, and satisfy what you call so memorably your ravenous need for love. And he met all those needs in me, and in particular, my need to be undesecrated from the things that I've done to others and the things that others have done to me. Cheryl, I appreciate your book so much. Your mom called you a seeker at one point, and I hope you'll keep seeking. I think these words from Matthew are maps to a true and never-ending, flourishing life. And now, Cheryl, I want you to meet my friend Kathy, who's going to come up and is going to share how Jesus has touched her.
Hi, I'm Kathy Auer, and I just wanted to kind of tell my story. My parents took me to church when I was growing up, and we went to church, but I didn't feel like there was anything that was in my heart, that I still had a restlessness. I was in college, and I prayed for Christ to come into my life. And I prayed, and I waited, and nothing happened. And I thought, hey God, I was here, where were you? And so I kind of went my merry way. I met Alex in college, at West Valley College, and we met in February. We got married in November, so it was very short and sweet. I didn't know what to give him for a wedding gift. I kept thinking, what should I give him for a wedding gift? And we had never even discussed religion. So I was driving on El Camino, and I stopped at a Christian bookstore, Sunnyvale Christian bookstore. I'd never been in it before, and I went in there, and it was almost like a voice said, get him a Bible. I love him. So I went up to the counter. I said, well, I'd like to buy a Bible. And they said, what kind? I didn't know there were different kinds of Bibles, but I bought him, they recommended a New American Standard, so I bought him a Bible and for a wedding gift, and gave it to him on our wedding night. And we started reading it some, but not too much. I also got pregnant very soon after we were married, and I said, I do not want any children. And he said, well, I don't really care. So I had an abortion. I never even felt guilty about it. Soon after that, we decided that we wanted to go to Valley Church. So we went to Valley Church. We went to a young married class, new married class. And John and Kelly Drake invited us to come to a Bible study. So we had a couple of drinks and we went to the Bible study. We couldn't even find the index. We couldn't even find anything in the Bible. But we kept going to the Bible study. After a short period of time, they also invited us to come to Hume Lake. We went to Hume Lake, and Ken Poor was the speaker. And he said, are you living for Christ? And I thought, I'd never heard about living for Christ. I thought, do you believe in Christ? And believing in Christ is like, do you believe in Santa? Peter Pan? Tooth Fairy? Sure. So there was nothing that I'd ever thought about following after Christ or living for Christ. So after we came back from Hume, God gave me a desire for children because I didn't want to have any children. So got back from Hume and God gave me a desire, and I got pregnant. And I was pregnant, but the whole time I was pregnant, there was a battle going on. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And there was a struggle. It's like, God is good, an eye for an eye. So I had gone to Hawaii, I was in a wedding, I came back from the wedding, and the doctor said, you need to have this baby. The baby hasn't grown. I thought, I don't deserve to have a baby. And it's like an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but God is good. So they induced me, I had a baby. The baby was very tiny. The baby could fit in a shoebox. And the baby came home after 11 days, weighed 4 pounds, 6 ounces after 11 days. And it's like, God, why are you good? You don't give us what we deserve. And it's been such a blessing. So we didn't know hardly anything about the Bible and forgiveness, but God is good. And we had friends, and I think having friends around to help you on this journey, it's like helping you to grow. Mike and Betty Hahn, they would help us and challenge us. We'd play games. We learned about the Bible. Having people to walk alongside you, I encourage everyone to be in a small group. Come alongside people and allow God. It's easy to get caught up in bondage of guilt. But we come to God and we say, Lord, you have taken all these things for me. So God has blessed us. I had 6 kids in 9.5 years. So I'll show you. This is our family. And our oldest, the one that was a preemie, is now a missionary in Africa, and she's got her own 3 children. And there's not, the tallest and the smallest are not in the picture. But to me, it's a story of God's great love and filling that empty spot in your heart and that restlessness in your heart that only Jesus can do. So that's my story.
Well, Cheryl and Valley Church, thank you for this chance to be together. And Cheryl, I just have to say that you've just hyped us all up about hiking. And so I know you live in Oregon, but if you happen to be in the Bay Area this week, I would love for you to join us from Valley Church. My friend Wendy Tomer is going to lead, and we're going to have a hike together at Rancho San Antonio Preserve at 8 a.m. this Wednesday. That's October 21st. We'd love to meet you, Cheryl, and talk to you and ask you questions, and love to share that experience together. It's moderate, so we'll do some uphill climbing, but it's not the PCT, so don't worry. Other than that, Valley Church, hope you have just a great week, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Maybe we can close by giving the Lord Jesus a round of applause, and we'll see you next week.